50,000 years ago, somewhere in what is now southern Africa, a human face leaned over a fire and breathed in. We always tell that story as if the human is the interesting character. They are not. At 12,000 years ago in the Utah desert, seeds of a wild tobacco plant sat in the ash of a hearth. By the time European ships crossed the Atlantic, that plant's descendants were growing on 5 continents, tended by millions of people who had never met each other, all of them craving the same molecule. This is a story about how a weed from the Andes figured out the human brain without ever having a thought. The plant did not find us. We found fire, and fire found the plant, and the plant had been waiting for something exactly like us for a very long time. The oldest controlled fire anyone has confirmed is at Wonderwork Cave in South Africa, roughly 1 million years ago. Bone fragments, burnt plant material, ash. For every generation of every human ancestor since, smoke was simply part of the air, not a choice, not a ritual, just what the air smelled like when you were warm and safe. Every throat that ever sat by a hearth was breathing a slow chemistry experiment, and the plants in those fires were running it. Here is the thing about alkaloids. Nicotine is not a flavor. It is not a gift. It is a neurotoxin, designed over millions of years of evolution to paralyze insects chewing the tobacco leaf. A caterpillar bites the leaf, nicotine floods the caterpillar's acetylcholine receptors, and the caterpillar stops. The plant's problem is solved. The plant does not care about you. The problem, from the plant's perspective, is that insect nervous systems and vertebrate nervous systems share very old architecture. The same receptor families that evolved in a caterpillar 600 million years ago are sitting, slightly modified, inside your brain right now. The plant aimed at the caterpillar. You happened to be standing in the same general direction. Cannabis did the same thing with a different mechanism. Your brain already had endocannabinoid receptors before the first human ever touched a cannabis plant. Those receptors regulate mood, memory, appetite, pain. They evolved for your own molecules. Cannabis simply produces a compound, THC, that fits the lock so precisely it is almost insulting. There was no design involved on the plant side. There was only chemistry that happened to work, and then natural selection did the rest, because plants that made insects stop and made primates come back for more were plants that got protected, replanted, and carried across continents. About 500 BC, on a high plateau in the Pamir Mountains, a group of mourners sat inside a wooden chamber and placed cannabis on hot stones. Excavators found the braziers, they found the residue. They found THC concentrations high enough to suggest the plants had been selected over generations for exactly that potency. These were not wild plants. Someone had been breeding them. The plant had been, in a very real sense, recruiting farmers for centuries before anyone called it cultivation. Herodotus wrote about Scythian warriors sealing themselves inside, felt tense with burning hemp and howling at whatever they saw. Archaeologists excavating Scythian burial sites found the tents, the braziers, the seeds, everything Herodotus described in the soil where he said it would be. A reporter who had been dead for 2,400 years turned out to be accurate. The Ebers Papyrus, one of the oldest medical documents ever found, describes smoke inhaled as medicine. Ayurvedic texts from roughly the same period detail dhumapana, literally smoke drinking, as a therapeutic practice. These traditions were not accidents. They were the formalization of something humans had already been doing around open fires for thousands of years, the slow recognition that breathing certain smoke changed something, dulled pain, altered vision, loosened the mind, and the decision to treat that seriously rather than ignore it. In the Americas, tobacco was not a casual habit. It was ritual technology. Shamans used it for trance states, for communicating with the dead, for healing ceremonies. The relationship between the plant and the people was understood as a relationship, reciprocal, requiring care on both sides. The plant was not a commodity, it was more like a colleague. That framing, it turns out, was probably the only framing that kept the whole thing manageable. Then 1492 happened, and tobacco met a very different kind of attention. Within a century, European merchants had turned a sacred plant into a tradable product. Within 2 centuries, it was being grown in plantation monocultures on land cleared by enslaved labor. Within 3 centuries, the curing and processing of tobacco leaf had been industrialized. And in the 20th century, cigarette manufacturers made the last refinement. They optimized the delivery mechanism. The freebase nicotine hit, the ammonia chemistry that got the drug into the bloodstream faster, the additives that kept the smoke smooth enough to inhale deeply. They had internal research. They knew what the molecule was doing. They buried it. The plant, of course, intended none of this. It cannot intend anything. It is a plant. That is the part that should sit with you for a moment. No intelligence, no strategy, no malice. Just a molecule that fit a receptor and a species that could not stop going back to the fire. Nicotiana tabacum was a regional Andean weed before 1492. Today, it is cultivated on 6 million hectares across more than 120 countries. We clear-cut forests for it. We irrigate it. We subsidize its farmers. We fight legal battles to keep selling it. We have done more to guarantee the survival and spread of this plant than we have done for almost any food crop. From the plant side, this is the most successful evolutionary bargain in the history of multicellular life. It did not conquer the world. It convinced us to do that on its behalf. And here is what is genuinely strange. The plants we merely eat, wheat, rice, corn, they spread because we needed them. The plants we crave spread because we could not stop. Need is rational. Craving is chemistry. And chemistry does not care about your reasons. The last few minutes before a smoker lights up are not about choice. They are about a receptor, in tissue descended from the same nervous system architecture as a caterpillar asking to be filled. The smoker is not weak. The smoker is running ancient code on hardware that was never updated for this particular input. What indigenous ritual understood, in practice, if not in these words, is that you have to hold the craving at a distance. You make it sacred. You make it rare. You make it mean something outside itself, so the chemistry does not just run. The cigarette industry understood the opposite. Remove the ritual, flatten the meaning, make it as frequent and as easy as possible, and the chemistry runs itself. The plant aimed at a caterpillar. It hit a civilization. Next time you smell wood smoke, the old kind, a real fire in the cold air, notice what happens in your chest before your brain catches up. That is 50,000 years of learning that fire means safety. That is the oldest memory you have. The plant was there first, and if you think about it honestly, it is still in charge. If this changed how you think about what you put in your body, share it with someone who needs to hear it.